You thought wisdom would bring peace, that if you learned enough, understood enough, saw enough, the confusion would disappear. But the more you learned, the heavier everything became. You started noticing the patterns in people, in power, in yourself. You saw how often love was selfish, how truth was distorted, how meaning was traded for convenience. You saw how little people really listen and how easily they believe what flatters them. And one day you realized that seeing too clearly doesn't make life easier, it makes it lonelier. That's the secret no one tells you. Wisdom hurts. Not because truth is cruel, but because illusions are comforting, and once you lose them, you can never unsee what's real. There's a loneliness that comes with awareness, not the kind cured by company, the kind born from sight. You start recognizing the false smiles, the polite lies, the way most people perform sincerity. You begin hearing the difference between what people say and what they actually mean. You notice how most conversations aren't exchanges of truth, but negotiations of ego. And it's exhausting. You used to envy those who seemed happy all the time, the ones who could drown in distractions and call it peace. Now you almost envy ignorance. Because ignorance feels like home, wisdom feels like exile. Plato understood this over 2,000 years ago. In his story of the cave, he described prisoners who mistake shadows for reality. One man escapes, sees the real world, and returns to tell the others, but they mock him. They prefer the shadows. That's what awakening feels like. You escape your own cave of illusion, only to realize that most of the world wants to stay inside theirs. You can't go back to being blind, and you can't make others see, so you walk alone in a world that no longer makes sense. That's the first price of wisdom: isolation. Nietzsche once said, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. The abyss is truth, vast, endless, indifferent. The more you look at it, the more it looks back. At first, truth feels noble. Then it starts to feel unbearable. You begin questioning everything: morality, purpose, even your own motives. You start wondering if there's meaning at all, or if you've just been comforting yourself with stories. Most people stop before that point. They retreat into belief, into entertainment, into noise. But if you keep looking, if you dare to know, you discover something terrifying. The world doesn't owe you meaning, and yet you still crave it. That craving, that desperate search for purpose in an indifferent universe, is the second price of wisdom: existential pain. You imagine that wisdom would make you calm, that you'd rise above emotion like a sage. But real wisdom doesn't remove emotion. It intensifies it. You feel joy more sharply because you know how rare it is. You feel grief more deeply because you understand what's been lost. You can't dismiss the pain of others because now you see how connected everything really is. You stop seeing people as good or bad. You see them as wounded, scared, trying. And somehow that makes their cruelty even sadder. Knowledge doesn't numb you, it breaks you open. Bonhoeffer said that stupidity is more dangerous than malice because stupidity can't be reasoned with. It resists truth itself. The wise suffer not because they know evil exists, but because they realize how often evil wears the mask of good intentions. Wisdom exposes hypocrisy, not just in others, but in you. Jung wrote that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That's the third price of wisdom. You have to meet yourself, not the persona, not the story, but the truth underneath. And what you find isn't always flattering. You realize how often your kindness was control in disguise, how your humility was pride masked as virtue, how your love was laced with fear. You learn that good and bad live inside the same heartbeat, that the line between saint and sinner runs through every soul, including yours. It's humbling. It's horrifying. It's human. You wanted to awaken, but awakening means burning the illusions that once protected you. Machiavelli, often misunderstood, warned that the pursuit of truth is a dangerous game. He wrote that the great majority of mankind are satisfied with appearances as though they were realities. To rule or even to survive, you must sometimes pretend. He wasn't celebrating deceit. He was exposing the paradox of truth in a dishonest world. If you speak honestly among those addicted to illusion, they will not thank you. They will crucify you. That's the fourth price of wisdom: rejection. The more clearly you see, the less you belong. Because truth isn't popular, it's provocative. And people don't love being provoked, they love being comforted. So you learn to carry your insights quietly, to hide depth behind a smile, to translate your clarity into language that doesn't threaten. That's not hypocrisy, that's survival. As you grow wiser, your relationships change. You stop arguing to win and start listening to understand. You stop seeking validation and start craving authenticity. You stop gossiping, complaining, pretending, and suddenly the room feels emptier. Not because people left you, but because they were never really there. Wisdom isolates, but it also purifies. You begin to see that solitude isn't punishment. It's a kind of sanctuary, a place where the noise of the world can no longer reach you. Plato said, "The price good men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men." The same is true for the inner world. If you ignore your soul, your ego will rule it. If you stop thinking for yourself, the loudest voice will think for you. Wisdom is refusing that rule, even if it means standing alone. The final price of wisdom is compassion, and it's the hardest one to bear. Because once you understand why people lie, you can't hate them for it. Once you see the fear behind cruelty, you can't fully despise it. Once you realize that every monster was once a broken child, you lose the luxury of simple hatred. Compassion sounds beautiful in theory, but in practice it hurts. It means seeing pain everywhere and knowing you can't fix it. It means holding two truths at once: that humanity is capable of incredible beauty and also infinite stupidity. And you have to love it anyway. That's wisdom's cruel mercy. It opens your heart even as it breaks it. There's a strange moment that comes after the suffering, when you realize that the pain is the teacher, that every disappointment carved empathy into your bones, that every heartbreak deepened your understanding of love, that every illusion you lost made you a little more free. This is where knowledge becomes wisdom, not when you learn more, but when you learn to see pain as part of truth. Nietzsche called this amor fati, the love of fate. He said the wise person doesn't curse suffering, they embrace it because they know it's necessary. To see life clearly is to accept that joy and sorrow aren't opposites, they are twins. You can't have one without the other. There comes a time when you stop trying to escape the burden of knowing, and you start carrying it with grace. You stop wishing to be understood, and you start seeking to understand. You stop fearing pain, and start recognizing it as evidence that you're still alive, still awake, still human. Bonhoeffer wrote, "To be silent in the face of evil is itself evil." Wisdom carries that same responsibility. Once you see, you can't stay silent. You can't go back to pretending. You become a quiet rebel, not with noise, but with truth. You speak gently, act honestly, love fiercely. You know the world will misunderstand you, but you also know that real peace isn't ignorance, it's integrity. Wisdom won't save you from suffering. It will teach you how to suffer well. It will strip you of illusions, but give you depth in return. It will isolate you from the crowd, but connect you to something eternal. And one day you'll realize that the pain of knowing was never punishment, it was initiation. Because wisdom isn't about escaping the darkness, it's about learning to see in it. You wanted to be wise, but wisdom was never about light. It was about learning how to love the dark without losing yourself inside it.